With the standard cage sizing for almost all reptiles getting bigger by the day, is there any species you can truly keep in a 30-gallon enclosure forever? Yeah, there's 5. I'm gonna tell you all about them. This is a new one. 30-gallon enclosures really aren't that common, unless you think about it, because a 30-gallon breeder enclosure looks like this and has these dimensions, or a front opening enclosure that has these dimensions. Either way, an 18-18-24 is kind of what we're talking about for most of the species, although we will include one species that actually likes the longer 30-gallon breeder, which is far more uncommon, but if you have a 40-gallon breeder, that would work too. And no, my Fiji banded iguana Frankie here is not on the list, but he's pretty and I just wanted to show him off. So let's start out with number 5, Europlatus Fantasticus. Well, so basically let's use common names here. We're talking about satanic leaf-tailed geckos. I love them, I think they're cool. I don't own one myself, but I have friends who do or did, and I have found these in the wilds in Madagascar, which is where they're found, by the way. This is a much cooler loving species than a lot of other species that you might be familiar with. A lot of people will say, oh, it's a gecko, it needs higher temperatures, it needs high humidity, whatever. Fantasticus are kept more like crested geckos than they are a leopard gecko, Fiji banded iguana, whatever. If it gets too hot, in fact, they will likely perish rather quickly. And I will say up front, if you've heard other people talk about fants in smaller enclosures, that's totally okay. I prefer larger enclosures for the animals that I speak about, so I'm not saying that those people are wrong, and you probably could get away with a 12 by 12 by 18 inch enclosure, but I just wouldn't recommend it. They're only about 4 inches in length, snout to vent, and they have this amazing tail that sometimes look like there's little bits and bites out of it. Think about it, it's a leaf-tail gecko. So these leaf-tailed geckos, of which there are tons of, by the way, the Fantasticus are one of the smaller species. But boy, do they look cool. We've all seen this image here that looks like it has dragon wings. That is a satanic leaf-tailed gecko. No, they don't have wings. No, that is not the real color. Yes, I've definitely used that photograph in some of my thumbnails before, but it's not really accurate. What they really look like is this. These are ones that we found in Madagascar. I got to find them, put them on a leaf, shoot them with a camera. It was really, really fun to do. And I'll tell you what, these are so captivating. The group of people I went with, we literally took 3 hours to photograph this animal. We just couldn't believe what we were seeing in person. And the fact that you can just have them in your collection and they're really not that expensive is kind of a wonder. It's amazing, and they do amazingly in captivity because most of them now are captive bred. Are there still wild caughts coming in still? Probably, but I wouldn't recommend getting those. Always get a captive bred species if you can, and these are insect eaters. So if you want an animal that you just throw in some crickets, probably a medium-sized or small-sized cricket for something this small, and then they go to town and eat them, some worms and things like that, you can. If you don't want to worry about the powdered diet, you don't have to with a gecko, even one this small. Keep in mind, although they do really well in planted, beautiful enclosures that are, the 18, 24 inch tall, they don't do well with handling, so this isn't an animal you'd want to get if you want to handle it all the time. Before we move on to the next one, thank you to today's sponsor, Private Internet Access. Private Internet Access is the VPN that I use, and I think you should too. If you're unfamiliar with what a VPN is, it's basically adding encryption to the way you browse. Browsing the internet or using the internet at all without a VPN is kind of like getting changed in front of an open window. There's really no privacy. If you're not using a VPN on your tablet, console, computer, phone, whatever, you're transmitting a ton of information out into the open which can be viewed by various different entities before reaching the intended websites. A VPN hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. You don't need to be a tech genius to understand that people seeing all of your private business is bad and being protected is good. Another great thing, and this is what I started to use a VPN for, was expanding your library. For example, if you're a Netflix customer and you're in the US and you want to watch The Office and you don't want to download the service provider that provides it, you can still watch it, change your VPN to Canada, make it look like you are in Canada, and you can watch The Office again.
Pretty cool.
And myself as a Canadian, there are so many things on US Netflix and other streaming services I don't get, Well, now I do. Because of the private internet access, VPN, I look like I'm somewhere else. Private internet access is available for all platforms: Windows, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and so many more. And when you download, you protect your entire household with one subscription. Or your workplace. My office is also protected with a VPN. Private internet access is the most transparent VPN provider. With over 30 million downloads, we never record or store user data, and our no logs policy has been proven multiple times in court and by third-party audit from Deloitte. Plus, there's no risk. It's risk-free. Private internet access offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support. Plus, if you go to my link below, you can get private internet access for 83% off and free for 4 months. 83% off. That makes it a little bit more than $2 a month. So hit my link below and protect yourself on the internet. Going along with animals you don't want to handle all the time, number 4, anoles. And we're talking about green anoles, Anoles carolinus. I can't pronounce things in Latin. You know you're not here because I'm smart, right? Why are you even here? The shiniest head of all the YouTubers? I don't know. Either way, we're talking about these little green anoles. I have a few of them, and I've really not been that kind to them in these videos over the last 6 years. When I talk about anoles, if I ever do, I always talk about them as if they're kind of boring, because they are, sort of. If you want an animal that you can't really handle, which is against what I do. Most of the animals I have are for handling. But you guys know, if you haven't been watching, there's a video right here. I have this giant 1,500-gallon enclosure over there, which is a multi-species cohab. And now that I'm resetting it up to look more like a subtropical type enclosure that, is really humid and has all these branches and plants, I thought that maybe anoles would be perfect for that. But obviously, most of us don't have that, and we're talking about 30-gallon enclosures. And these are perfect for 30-gallon enclosures, and although most people will say, oh, you can put them in much smaller enclosures, if you want to see how active and vibrant and crazy they are when they run around, give them something bigger, like a 30. You could even likely put a few of them, maybe 2 or 3, do your research, this is not a care guide, in an enclosure that's 18, 18, 24. They do need a taller enclosure. This is an animal that is always going to be found above the ground, or almost always. I got to find these guys in, well, not their native range. They're invasive in Cuba, but I got to see them in Cuba. I've seen them in Florida where they are actually native to. They're native to the southeast of the US. And I always found them up in trees or bushes, but not in the canopies, kind of, almost eye level, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower, but they're not gonna need something crazy tall like a skyscraper enclosure, although you could give them one. They're just gonna be great. A 3-inch lizard, snout to vent, and they have a long tail, kind of like a Fiji banded iguana. So they might be 9 or 10 inches in total length if you get a really big one. They're vibrant green, just absolutely fantastic. And they are diurnal, which means you're gonna see them out during the day. So if you're someone who likes to watch their animals during the day, this is a perfect animal. This is an animal that if you wanted to have in your office or wherever you are, your living room, they're gonna be moving constantly. The reason I put them in the big enclosure is because I wanted something that's going to move all the time. Where the snakes I'm gonna put in there, which don't eat anoles, by the way, it's totally fine. We'll do a video on it in a few weeks, the new setup. They move all the time, and that's what I wanted. Something that your eye is always moving. Number 3, White's tree frogs. Okay, I love White's tree frogs, and if you've been watching the channel, you've definitely heard mine calling. They don't sound like normal frogs calling or ribbiting or croaking. They sound like dogs sneezing. I don't know, it sounds so unique. And they're big. These are some of the biggest tree frogs in the entire world. They're from Australia, Indonesia, places like that. Man, you're moving and grooving today. Look at Frankie just chilling. So they can actually handle a little bit drier. They can handle it. Don't dry out your frogs. I promise they'll die. They can handle a little bit warmer than a lot of other species. Of course, put them in the ideal range. I'm just letting you know they're a very hardy species as a fun fact. But in general, they're not that expensive, and you could keep 1 or 2 of them in a 30-gallon vertical enclosure, no problem. Every care guide I read, it seems like people keep them in smaller enclosures, or they keep bigger groups in bigger enclosures. But I really do think 1 or 2 would be kind of the max for a 30-gallon enclosure. In fact, I've never kept white tree frogs in enclosures that size. I've always kept them in something much bigger, but they're really fun because although they're not super active, at night they will move around. You'll hear them calling, especially if it's males and especially if there's females around. And if you keep them in a room that's not your bedroom, it'll be okay. You'll still hear them, but it won't be so loud that you're gonna be up at night. If you keep white tree frogs, males that are croaking, that are calling, in your room, I promise you, you're not going to sleep that night. They're really, really loud, but I do love them, and I think that they're fun to watch. Throw in some insects in there, they'll go crazy trying to eat them. They are kind of clumsy, which I actually really like. I think it's hilarious, but either way, we always ruin a list with an amphibian. Of course, these are not reptiles, and for this list, I want it to be white tree frogs because they fit the bill. Number 2. Rosie Boas. I almost never talk about Rosie Boas, and maybe I should more often. Where are you going, Frankie? You just wanna, okay, there you go, buddy. Rosie Boas are one of the only boas from North America. There's 2. Well, I mean, technically 3, because there is a portion of Mexico where you can get some BCIs, but either way, in the US and Canada, there's really 2. One in Canada, and then Rosie Boas go. Anyway, the point is, North America's boa. Rosie Boas are pretty small, 1.5 to 3 feet. There are outliers. I want to make this known. Although I'm saying, a Fant is this big and a Rosie Boa is this big, there's outliers. So, of course, if you get a Rosie Boa that gets to 4 feet, like one of the crazy outlier ones, get it a big enclosure. But for normal Rosie Boas, this works. And this is the lengthwise enclosure. So a 30-gallon breeder is what I'm talking about here. Because a 30-gallon breeder is 36 inches. The max length of these snakes is 36 inches. And more average is around 24 inches. So in my opinion, it's plenty of space. They do move around quite a bit. But what's interesting about Rosie Boas is they're not very flighty or bitey, just kind of out of the box. Like that's, or out of the egg, I guess. That's the way that they are. Well, not out of the egg because they're boas, therefore they don't lay eggs. And again, outliers. I know if you're a snake discovery fan, they have a Rosie Boa that just bites everything. Most of them are not like that. Most Rosie Boas are just super chill. They're awesome. You don't have to worry about them being bitey and flighty and stuff like that. And the care is really easy too. So if you want an animal that's not going to take tons of your time and is just rather simple to care for and easy and fun to handle, you really can't beat a Rosie Boa. And number 1, best reptile for a 30-gallon forever, carpet chameleons. Are you pooping? No, he's okay. Carpet chameleons are kind of an outlier. Normally when you talk about chameleons, you're thinking veiled chameleon, panther chameleon, Jackson's chameleon. Those are the 3 that are really popular. And I think that those all need much bigger enclosures, probably something 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot as a minimum, maybe even bigger. Go watch someone like, Bill Strand at the Chameleon Academy that can help you with that stuff. But carpet chameleons, this is something that I've actually kept myself, and this is a testament to why you buy captive animals. Captive bred carpet chameleons actually do really well in captivity. They don't have issues with just dying, dropping dead overnight most of the time. They're pretty hardy and can actually be considered a beginner level animal for some people. Maybe not me, but some people consider them that. If you get an animal that was brought in, it's probably full of parasites and it just doesn't do that well. But with that said, they're not super difficult and they can definitely live their whole lives in an enclosure 24, 18, 18, okay? They're just such a cool species because they look different day by day and judging by the temperature and their mood and the season and things like that. One day they're gonna be bright purple and then maybe they're gonna be a little bit more subdued. And generally they're really fun to handle if you don't handle for extended periods of time. Most chameleons don't tolerate handling that well, but carpet chameleons, iguanas blow sodium out of their nose and now I have sodium in my ear. Most chameleons don't like handling, but these ones will handle it pretty well, handling pretty well. Either way, of course, if you want something really good for handling, get the Rosie Boa. These fit in the list. And if you want an enclosure that is really well planted, that's what I recommend. Now, if you're gonna sparsely plant it, then get something taller, get something that's 36 inches high. But if you're gonna use all of the space, then absolutely for sure, it is great to have an enclosure that is 24 inches high. Just make sure you use all of it. And they're diurnal, so they'll need the UVB and they'll need to be eating insects, but it's during the day and they do flick their tongue out and grab it like you'd think a chameleon does. And they have the independent moving eyes and just overall, they're cool. It's my favorite species to keep in captivity of carpet chameleons. I hope we get lots more that are captive bred. If you're in the US, there's guys like Frank Payne out there who are doing it. But either way, let me know in the comments section below what you think the best 30-gallon enclosure is. As always, please hit the like and subscribe, really helps the channel. Thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring today's episode. And if you want to get merch at a discount, one-on-one conversations with me showing you whatever animals you want, talking to you about Instagram, whatever it is, all that and more for as little as $1 a month on Patreon. Join the crew, link in the description. And because I do videos twice a week, that means I'll see you in the next one.